Xianxia gazed silently at the pair of red hammers in her hand, and then he said, "Those are your weapons. Aren't you afraid that I would lose them? If you lose them, then you lose them." Xiaoman spoke with an unconcerned tone. "In any case, I still gained more," even though she said that, her gaze still frequently descended onto the hammers. Xianxia shook his head, and then he gazed at Tongfun. "Give the natural treasure back to me. I've changed my mind." Xianxia was extremely displeased because Xiaoman was giving him everything she had while Tongfun refused to give him anything. Everyone here was stunned, including Tongfun. "What are you trying to say?" Tongfun spoke in a low voice. Xianxia laughed with ridicule and said, "Isn't it obvious? It belongs to me, and I don't want to give it away as dowry anymore. Because I want to use it to make this bet." The second elder's eyes instantly lit up when he heard Xianxia, and the blazing desire in his eyes was seemingly material. This time, Tongfun's expression turned unsightly. Xianxia continued when Tongfun remained silent. "What? Could it be that someone intends to shamelessly take it by force?" "Exactly." Meanwhile, second elder added, "Tongfeng, you wouldn't be that shameless, right? If you even seize the possessions of an exalt realm profounder by force, then you would truly be bringing shame to our fire spirit race. Moreover, I would look down upon you from now on. It's even to the extent that I would feel it to be humiliating to be an elder like you." He'd returned everything Tongfun had spoken about him just moments ago, and this caused the second elder to feel extraordinarily pleased. "Yi Yang, do you understand what you're doing?" Tongfun gazed at Xianxia as he spoke in a low voice. Xianxia chuckled and said, "Of course I do. Elder Tong, since you still haven't returned it to me, could it really be that you intend to seize an exalt realm profounder's possession by force? Or you, Elder Tong, intend to act shamelessly for the sake of a natural treasure?" Countless people gasped when they heard him. Are his balls made of steel? He actually dared to speak like that to a half-saint? "You're not a match for him," said Tongfun. "That's my problem." Xianxia didn't show weakness in the slightest as he stared Tongfun in the eyes. Xiaoman intended to say something, but Xianxia spoke before she could. "Miss Xiaoman, I owe you my life, and I'll remember that forever. If you insist on taking the nether ghost flame, then I'll agree to give it to you. But don't ever mention anything about a marriage after that. All right?" Xiaoman fell silent for a short while before she said, "If you do that, then I—" Meanwhile, Qianyan ridiculed, "Tongfun, you kept saying that I'm a despicable and shameless person, but now it would seem like you're exactly the same when facing a treasure, aren't you?" Tongfun paid no attention to Qianyan, and he just gazed at Xianxia and said, "You'll die right away if I give it to you. Understand?" The meaning behind his words was that he would return it but stop protecting Xianxia, so Xianxia would still die even if Xianxia won the bet. How could Xianxia not understand what he meant? Xianxia immediately smiled. "I believe that if I use it as my dowry, then many elders would be willing to marry their granddaughters to me. So, they would naturally be willing to protect me as well." Xianxia understood the situation very clearly. All of these elders were only united on the surface. Both the Grand Elder and Fourth Elder desired the Nether Ghost Flame, and the only reason they hadn't tried to seize it was because they lacked a reason. He who was the owner of the Nether Ghost Flame just happened to be able to give them such a reason. The reason he acted in this way was mainly because he couldn't stand the sight of Tongfun. In his opinion, if he couldn't stand the sight of someone, then he would bring even greater displeasure to that person. The Grand Elder and Fourth Elder were instantly tempted when they heard him. After all, it was a natural treasure which could improve their strengths. So, not to mention a granddaughter, they would even be willing to give up 2 granddaughters. "I won't give it back to you because you're already considered to be married to Xiaoman." Tongfun put the Nether Ghost Flame away once he finished speaking. He would naturally not take it by force if it was anything else. However, it was a natural treasure. It wasn't just related to his strength. It was even related to his survival. So he wouldn't give it up no matter what. He was truly giving up any and all sense of shame. So what else could Xianxia say? After all, he couldn't take it back. "I'll help you with it," It was the Grand Elder who'd been silent until now that had spoken. Everyone here was shocked, and they gazed at the Grand Elder with disbelief. The Second Elder and Tongfun were extremely surprised as well. They hadn't expected that the Grand Elder who'd always kept a low profile would step forward at a time like this. Moreover, he was even helping a human profounder. Xianxia's gaze descended onto the Grand Elder. Could that geezer have seen through my strength? But it wasn't long before he rejected such a thought. After all, while the old man's strength was formidable, he was absolutely not stronger than Lu Yen. So, it was absolutely impossible for the old man to see through the seal which Lu Yen had placed upon him. But that made him even more puzzled. The Grand Elder didn't provide any explanation. He flipped his palm casually, and then 5 palm-sized and fiery red crystals appeared there. He said, "If you win, then just give me 2 of the fire crystals you win." "What if I lose?" asked Xianxia. He replied, "It doesn't matter. Just consider it as me being old and having bad vision." Xianxia took a deep and long glance at the Grand Elder, and then he waved his hand and the 5 1,000-year-old fire crystals instantly flew into Xianxia's grasp. Xianxia's expression changed slightly when he held them because the energy within them was actually not inferior to the water soul which that woman from the mermaid clan had given to him. Now, he believed Xiaoman, and he knew that his injuries could definitely be healed in the shortest possible time if he consumed one of them. If he consumed all 5 of them and the water soul, then he might even be able to attain the monarch realm. Grand Elder, 5 1,000-year-old fire crystals aren't easy to gather. The Second Elder spoke flatly. "Aren't you afraid that he'll lose them? But what if he wins?" The Grand Elder smiled. "If he wins, then I would gain 2 more just like that." The Second Elder grunted coldly, and then he gazed at Bai Chun and said, "Are you confident?" After all, 5 1,000-year-old fire crystals were extremely precious even to him because they could improve his strength. After all, there weren't many treasures in this world that could improve the strength of a half-saint. Bai Chun smiled with confidence. Not to mention that he's at the Exalt realm. He wouldn't be able to resist 3 attacks of mine even if he's at the monarch realm. Xianxia didn't know what to say in response. The Second Elder nodded, and his concerns vanished. After all, the gap between a monarch realm and Exalt realm profounder was still extremely huge. It wasn't that Exalt realm experts who could fight monarch realm experts didn't exist. Such existences were quite rare even in the hallowed grounds. Moreover, he'd never heard of a genius called Yang. So, it was very likely that it was just an independent cultivator. Moreover, his discerning ability was naturally sufficient for him to discern that Xianxia was heavily injured. So, he felt that Bai Chun would be able to deal with Xianxia even if Bai Chun only utilized a few % of his strength. Even though he ceaselessly found reasons to console himself, there was still a trace of anxiousness and uneasiness in his heart. However, he had no choice but to go on with the bet now. In next to no time, a place of marriage and happiness had become a place of battle. Everyone moved aside, and only Xianxia and Bai Chun stood facing each other at the center. Bai Chun grabbed the hilt of his sword and drew it slowly. A cold glow flashed while Bai Chun's aura became sharp and lofty, and the faint smile on his face still remained. In the eyes of everyone else, it was naturally a sign of confidence. A sign of absolute confidence towards himself. Bai Chun didn't attack. He took out a white handkerchief and started to slowly wipe his sword. Moreover, the serious expression on his face made it seem like his sword was his lover. Some say that confident and serious men were the most handsome, and that was true. Bai Chun wasn't just serious and confident. His appearance was truly handsome as well. So, when he started wiping his sword, the heartbeats of countless women in the surroundings instantly started speeding up. At this moment, the smile on Chen Mei's face could be said to be even brighter than sunlight. Because he was her man. In the fire spirit race, a woman's prestige was extremely important, and there were 2 ways to earn it. The first was with one's own strength, and the second was through one's partner. Obviously, her man was doing that for her right now. As for Yi Yang, she turned her head to glance at Xianxia, and then she couldn't help but laugh with ridicule. At this moment, Xianxia's face was slightly pale from the injuries he suffered. As for his aura and bearing, he did have a little if one looked carefully. However, when the two of them were compared, it was like the difference between the heavens and the earth. Bai Chun suddenly gazed at Yang Yi and asked, "Do you know what the sword is?" Yang Yi was slightly stunned. He thought for a moment and said truthfully, "I think that it isn't important because all swords are used to kill." How crude and ignorant! Bai Chun suddenly roared furiously. "Just hearing what you said tell me that you're an ignorant and crude independent cultivator. The sword is the king of all weapons, the monarch of all weapons. It's noble, yet you actually said that it's used to kill. How crude and ignorant to the extreme. It's an insult to my sword to draw my sword against you." "Nice!" Qian Mei was the first to cry out. Many others in the surroundings were shocked by his words as well, and then they started shouting loudly. "See, that's a true sword cultivator. That's how sword cultivators should be. Even I feel like training in the sword Dao after I heard that. I heard the patriarch's daughter is skilled in both the sword and saber. I wonder if her sword Dao or Bai Chen's sword Dao is superior. He really is too handsome. Unfortunately, Qian Mei has made a move on him." Yang Yi was stunned for a long time before he said, "Fine. That's your sword Dao. I don't want to say anything about it. However, in my opinion, the sword is used to kill because a sword that doesn't kill isn't a sword. Crude. Ignorant. Ignorant. Let's move further away from that fellow. Staying close to him is a disgrace to us." This time, it wasn't Bai Chun who insulted Yang Yi, and it was the other profounders of the fire spirit race. "Killing you with my sword is an insult to it." Bai Chun flicked his finger once he finished speaking, and then a strand of sword chi shot towards Yang Yi. The sword chi wasn't enhanced by sword intent, and it was just a pure strand of sword chi. However, it was exactly such a pure strand of sword chi which made Yang Yi act like he was facing a formidable opponent. His entire body was tense like a fully drawn bow. Many people in the surroundings couldn't help but start laughing when they saw him act like that. Qian Mei laughed with ridicule before looking at Xiao Man with a gaze that was filled with disdain and ridicule. The latter held tightly onto her iron hammers and seemed to be ready to lend a hand at any moment. Finally, the sword chi arrived before Yang Yi. Yang Yi suddenly moved. He clenched his right hand into a fist and pulled it back slightly. In the next moment, he attacked swiftly, and he smashed a punch towards the sword chi, causing a wave of energy to flash forward. Bang! The wave of energy and sword chi exploded apart upon impact, and this stunned all the spectators. He actually blasted Bai Chen's sword chi into pieces. In the next moment, they were stunned again because Yang Ye's figure suddenly moved backwards repeatedly, and he only stopped after moving almost 100 steps back. After he stopped moving, Yang Yi started to gasp for breath as if that punch had used all the strength within him. Haha! Such trash actually bragged about resisting 3 attacks from Bai Chen? I finally understand what overestimating one's strength is. This is the epitome of it. I'd thought that he was putting on a show of weakness to give us a surprise. But now it would seem like he really is just a weakling. He was even almost unable to resist just 10% of Bai Chen's strength. He can be considered to be one of the weakest even amongst the Exalt realm. I've lived for over 20 years, but I've never seen someone so determined to seek death. Fu Jingxian shook her head as she gazed at Yang Yi, and then she withdrew her gaze. Just like everyone else, she'd thought that Yang Yi would surprise her. But the facts of the situation were that he'd almost been unable to resist just 10% of Bai Chen's strength. If there were expectations, then there would be disappointment. She was disappointed right now. There was no reason why, and it was just pure disappointment. It was like being prepared to watch an entertaining show, but the actor suddenly failed to portray the part. It was definitely something that would arouse disappointment in others. As she gazed at Yang Yi, who was still gasping, Xiaoman wanted to go over but was stopped by Tongfen, who said, "Let him suffer a little. It'll be beneficial to him." Xiaoman was just about to speak when Yang Yi suddenly started walking towards Bai Chen, and he walked extremely slowly like a child who had just learned how to walk. In the eyes of the spectators, it was undoubtedly a sign of suffering severe internal injuries. Khan. Can't continue. Yang Yi stuttered slightly. Bai Chun pointed his sword towards the ground and shot a sideways glance at Yang Yi. You were actually able to resist 10% of my strength. Looks like you're not completely trash. It seems like another strand of sword chi from me would cause your internal organs to be instantly shattered. The heavens are benevolent, and so am I. Don't say that I didn't give you a chance. Kneel right now, kowtow, and admit your mistakes to Mayor. I'll let you live if she's willing to forgive you. Qian Mei grunted coldly and crossed her arms before her as she gazed at Yang Yi. I'll forgive you if you kowtow 100 times to me, all right? She gazed at Xiaoman as she spoke. Xiaoman didn't speak. She just walked over to Yang Ye's side and took his hand. Let's leave. The battle isn't over. Meanwhile, Chen Yen spoke coldly. Of course you can leave, but you must admit defeat. Xiaoman was just about to speak when Yang Yi suddenly flipped his palm and grabbed her hand instead. And then shock appeared in Xiaoman's eyes. Yang Yi smiled and said, Don't worry, it'll be fine. As he spoke, he let go of her and continued walking towards Bai Chun. Xiaoman remained on the spot as if she was petrified. Can't continue. Yang Yi seemed as if he'd decided to risk his life when he spoke these words, and resolve covered his face. The Grand Elder who was supporting Yang Yi sat on the chair with his eyes slightly closed. It seemed as if he was in deep sleep. No one knew what he was thinking. On the other hand, Chen Yen who sat by his side was smiling from ear to ear. After all, the scene which played out before his eyes just now had caused that last trace of worry in his heart to vanish. Actually, while Yang Ye's display was slightly exaggerated, it wasn't too far off from the truth. Because of the special characteristics possessed by 10th level sword intent and above, he could absorb the sword intent of anyone who possessed sword intent at a level beneath his own. He could have just stood there without moving just now and allowed it to strike him, because it still wouldn't be able to harm him in the slightest. Not to mention 10% of Bai Chen's strength. Even if Bai Chen utilized 100% of his strength, it was still impossible for him to harm Yang Yi with his sword chi. However, Yang Yi didn't do that. As for the reason, there were two. Firstly, he didn't want to expose his strength yet. Secondly, he had a plan of his own. That was exactly why he'd utilized his physical strength to deal with that sword chi. At this moment, the internal injuries he suffered were extremely severe, so forcefully utilizing his strength naturally caused him to feel unwell. Coupled with his intent to conceal his strength, it was naturally easy for him to deceive the half-saints who were present here. The others in the surroundings were dumbstruck when they heard Yang Yi. Did that collision knock out a screw in his head? They've already agreed to let him live if he admits defeat, yet he actually wants to insist on giving his life away. Is there really something wrong with him in the head? It seems to me like he has gone mad with greed for those fire crystals. I still feel slight admiration for him. At the very least, I would absolutely not dare to do that. As they say, a newborn calf isn't aware of the terrors of a tiger, or the ignorant are fearless. I bet the next attack will transform him into a corpse. Bai Chun tightened his grasp on his sword. For some unknown reason, a faint cold glow had suddenly appeared on his sword, and some of the profounders who were closer to him sensed a ghastly coldness coming from it. Bai Chun gazed at Yang Yi and spoke coldly. Did you think that you would be able to resist my second attack since you succeed at resisting the first? If that's what you're thinking, then allow me to tell you that you're mistaken, extremely mistaken. Yang Yi suddenly said, Someone close to me told me that I have to keep a low profile and be cautious once I've left home, and I shouldn't rashly cause trouble, because she knows that my temper isn't very good. Once I stop keeping a low profile, then it's very likely the blood would flow into rivers. I've reflected on it and felt that I really was a madman when I got angry, and I should keep a low profile. When he spoke up to this point, Yang Yi paused for a moment before he said, But when I encountered a conceited idiot like you, I was truly unable to restrain myself any longer. Motherfucker. If you want to fight, then fight. Why nag on continuously? Don't you just want to show off in front of everyone? Is that even necessary? Would you die if you don't try to show off? Do you know how many times I've almost been unable to stop myself from killing you? The surroundings fell into deathly silence. All of them opened their eyes wide and gazed at him with disbelief. He's keeping a low profile? He has a bad temper? Blood will flow into rivers if he gets angry? He thinks he can kill Bai Qin? Has he gone mad? Meanwhile, the Grand Elder opened his eyes and glanced at Yang Yi. But he immediately closed his eyes right after that. As for Qian Yan, a cold smile and disdain still covered his face. The fourth elder and Tong Fun frowned slightly, and no one knew what they were thinking. You think you're a defiant profounder? Meanwhile, Qian Mei suddenly pointed at Yang Yi and spoke with disdain. You're keeping a low profile and have a bad temper? You'll cause blood to flow into rivers? You want to kill Bao Chun? Why don't you do it right now? Why don't you let me see how you do that? An ant at the Exalt realm like you is actually bragging like this. It's the best joke I've ever heard. You'll have the chance. Yang Yi glanced indifferently at her, and then he gazed at Bai Chun and said, Come on? I've been standing here for a long time. Right? Don't waste your breath and try to threaten me, and don't start bragging about yourself. I'm really not interested in listening to all of that. If you're a man, then be a little more decisive so that we can conclude the matter and I can go have my food. The spectators were speechless when they heard this. Bai Chen's face wasn't as carefree as it was before, and it was slightly ferocious instead. Since you're so desperate to die, then I'll send you on your way. As soon as he finished speaking, Bai Chen stabbed his sword forward, and then a ray of sword chi shot out from its tip. It was extremely swift and arrived before Yang Yi in less than a breath of time. This strand of sword chi was still not enhanced by sword intent, but it was much stronger than the previous sword chi, and it was much faster as well. Yang Yi remained still, and he only moved when it was just a few dozen centimeters away from him. He didn't launch a counterattack but moved slightly to the side, and then the sword chi just flashed by right before him while leaving him completely unharmed. The spectators were flabbergasted. He avoided it? He actually avoided it? Is this a joke? Qian Mei, Fu Jingxian, and Bai Chun were all stunned. In next to no time, Bai Chun recovered from his shock and spoke furiously. You've broken the rules. You said you would resist 3 attacks of mine, but you actually avoided it. Yang Yi laughed coldly and said, I broke the rules? I said that I would resist them, but I never said that I wouldn't dodge them. If you want to blame something, then blame your own sword chi for being too slow. Why am I the one to be blamed? You. Bai Chen's face was livid. It wasn't stated that he couldn't dodge. Meanwhile, the Grand Elder suddenly opened his eyes and said, Being able to dodge can be considered as a form of ability as well. What do you think, Second Elder? Qian Yan's expression was gloomy. He glanced at Yang Yi, and then he gazed at Bai Chun and said, Can he not dodge? Stop holding back. Let me see if he'll still be able to dodge then. Remember, don't hold back. He can only use 30% of his strength. The Grand Elder spoke abruptly. 30% is enough to kill him. Meanwhile, Bai Chun roared furiously, and then his sword started trembling violently. After that, 10th level sword intent surged out from within him, and it caused countless spectators to be unable to help but take numerous steps back. Because it was the last attack and Yang Yi had infuriated him, Bao Chun didn't hold back at all. However, he couldn't break the rules, so while he did release his 10th level sword intent, he didn't utilize it to suppress Yang Yi. Die! A furious roar resounded as Bai Chun swung his sword swiftly, and then a cold ray of light flashed at an alarming speed. It was swift to the point some Exalt Realm experts in the surroundings weren't even able to catch sight of it. Break! At practically the exact same moment, Yang Ye's voice resounded here, and then they saw him clench his fists and smash them towards the sword chi. A cold smile that carried disdain arose on the corners of Bai Chen's mouth. An injured Exalt Realm profounder like him is trying to resist my sword intent in a head-on collision? He's dreaming. In next to no time, the cold smile and disdain on his face had stiffened. It wasn't just him. Everyone else here was stunned as well. An explosion resounded before Bai Chen's sword chi vanished, and Yang Yi there on the spot without moving an inch. How could that be possible? Bai Chun seemed as if he'd lost his soul, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. Qian Yan had stood up with his fists clenched tightly, and his eyes were filled with disbelief as well. The Grand Elder who sat by Chen Yan's side opened his eyes as well, and he gazed at Yang Yi while a trace of an indescribably color filled it. Fu Jingxian stared fixedly at Yang Yi, as if she wanted to renew her understanding of him. Yang Yi patted his hands together and gazed at Bai Chen. "You've lost." It would have been utterly impossible for Yang Yi to resist Bai Chen's attack with just his physical strength if Bai Chen had utilized all his strength. However, Bai Chen hadn't utilized his full strength, and he'd only utilized 30% of his strength. In Yang Ye's opinion, 30% of Bai Chen's strength was... Actually, he'd intended to feign weakness like he had during the previous attacks, but he really couldn't stand the sight of this fellow, so he stopped acting. In any case, all he revealed was his physical strength. As they cared at Yang Ye's carefree appearance, many quick-witted people instantly came to an understanding. They realized that he'd truly been feigning weakness. Impossible! You cheated! Meanwhile, Qian Mei suddenly pointed at Yang Yi and roared, "How could you possibly resist that attack? How could you possibly do it? It's utterly impossible. So you definitely cheated. Right, you definitely cheated." Yang Yi said, "I really don't want to waste my breath on a stupid woman like you, but I'll still explain. You say that I cheated? How did I cheat? What is considered as cheating?" "You!" Qian Mei was instantly exasperated, and she was about to attack him. However, the Grand Elder suddenly said, "Qian Mei, you say that he cheated? Are you saying that the four of us are old and can't see clearly? Moreover, as long as no one helped him, then he was able to resist it because he possessed the ability to do so, understand?" Qian Mei's expression changed, and she didn't dare refute the Grand Elder. After all, the Grand Elder's status in the fire spirit race was merely inferior to the Patriarch. So, she could only stare resentfully at Yang Yi, as if she wanted to stare him to death. "You tricked me." Meanwhile, Bai Chun spoke abruptly. Yang Yi nodded and said, "I did. What are you going to do about it?" Bai Chen's face instantly had a ferocious expression on it, and his sword was trembling incessantly. Yang Yi paid no attention to him. He gazed at Qian Yan and said, "Hand it over." The corners of Qian Yan's mouth twitched a little. After all, it was 5 1,000-year-old fire crystals, and it would take a few dozen years even for him to obtain such an amount. So, he was naturally unwilling to hand it over just like that. However, right when he was about to act shamelessly, the Grand Elder spoke, "Qian Yan, you're the second elder of our fire spirit race at any rate. Wouldn't the human race laugh at our race if you don't keep your word even when it's related to just that little bit of treasures? Hand it over." Qian Yan's face fell, but he remained silent. "What? You intend to swallow my possessions as well?" Meanwhile, the Grand Elder spoke abruptly. Qian Yan pondered deeply for a short while before he smiled. "Grand Elder, you must be kidding. Am I that kind of person? I accept my defeat. Take it." As he spoke, he waved his hand and tossed 5 fire crystals to the Grand Elder before he gazed at Yang Yi. "Good. Very good. I never expected that I would have misjudged you slightly. Very good indeed." His eyes and voice were filled with undisguised killing intent. Yang Yi paid no attention to him. He gazed at the Grand Elder, and the latter didn't hesitate to wave his right hand, causing 3 fire crystals to fly over to Yang Yi. The gazes of countless people in the surroundings burned with desire as they gazed at the fire crystals in Yang Ye's grasp, and some of their gazes even carried a cold glow. Most of the people here were at the Monarch realm while Yang Yi was merely at the Exalt realm. So, it was like a child running around streets with a bar of gold. How could anyone not be filled with greed and ill intent? Yang Yi disregarded them. He turned around and walked over to Xiaoman before he passed one of them to her. The latter was slightly stunned and said, "For me." Yang Yi nodded. The spectators were first stunned when they witnessed this scene, and then they couldn't help but start cursing. What a fucking idiot! Does he not know what he has in his hands? Those are fire crystals, 1,000-year-old fire crystals. Yet he actually gave them away so casually? Is there something wrong with him in the head? What a fucking idiot! A 1,000-year-old fire crystal is enough for him to advance into the Monarch realm. yet he gave it away so casually. What a fool. I really feel so jealous. Why wasn't I able to encounter such a fellow? He probably doesn't know how valuable they are. Right, he clearly seems like an ignorant fellow. He'll probably cry once he knows how valuable they are. Meanwhile, Xianxia suddenly turned around and glanced at them. He said, "What does this have to do with all of you? Does it have anything to do with all of you?" As he spoke, Xianxia tossed one of the fire crystals on the ground, and then he stomped on it. "I'm not just going to give it away, I'm even going to do this. Bite me." All of them were at a loss for words, as they watched Xianxia toss a 1,000-year-old fire crystal on the ground and step on it. The corners of the mouths of all the 4 half-saints here twitched. After all, it was a 1,000-year-old fire crystal. Even they treated it like a precious treasure. Yet now, this fellow called Yiyang was actually stomping on it. They had the impulse to slap him to death on the spot. Meanwhile, one of the men from the fire spirit race suddenly pointed at Xianxia and spoke furiously, "You idiot! You ignorant fool! Do you know how precious fire crystals are? Even half-saints would have to spend at least 10 years of time to obtain just one. But you are actually treating a 1,000-year-old fire crystal like that. You should suffer the wrath of the heavens." Xianxia laughed coldly and said, "What does whether I suffer the wrath of the heavens have to do with you? Don't complain that I didn't give all of you a chance. I'll give all of you a chance right now. All of you can do as that idiot Bai Chun did and make me resist 3 moves of yours. These 2 fire crystals in my hand will belong to you if I fail, all right?" Bai Chen's face twitched violently while killing intent surged in his eyes. "Really?" The voices of many had started to tremble. Xianxia said, "Of course, all of you can only use 30% of your strength. Moreover, just as before, all of you must bet 1,000-year-old fire crystals." All of them instantly felt dispirited when they heard him because they didn't have 1,000-year-old fire crystals. "I'll make that bet with you." Meanwhile, Bai Chun spoke abruptly. Xianxia glanced at Bai Chun and said, "You have 1,000-year-old fire crystals?" Bai Chun spoke in a low voice, "I don't." "Since you don't, then why the fuck are you making noise now?" Xianxia shouted angrily. "I'll bet with my life." Bai Chun spoke solemnly. "I refuse." Xianxia refused decisively. "If you want to bet, then bet 1,000-year-old fire crystals. Otherwise, fuck off all the way back home. I don't have the time to waste my breath on all of you." He was too arrogant. It was to the point that many were on the verge of exploding with rage. Bai Chen gazed at Chen Yan. Chen Yan's face was quite gloomy, and no one knew what he was thinking. A short while passed before he flipped his palm once more, and another 5 fire crystals appeared in his grasp. He said, "Yiyang, we can continue the bet, but the rules have to be changed. You must resist an attack that carries Bai Chen's full strength. We'll make the bet with you if you agree." Xianxia fell silent. "Haha, what is it? Yiyang, have your balls shrunk? Weren't you so arrogant just now? Weren't you very strong? Why don't you continue with your arrogance now? Come on." Earlier, Brother Bai merely utilized 30% of his strength, and he wasn't even serious. Yet you actually thought that you can fight Brother Bai? How laughable. Now that Brother Bai is taking it seriously, you've shrunk back immediately? He's just trash that was full of conceit from his initial success. Trash like you are usually not even worth a few lines in chivalric novels. Xianxia clenched his fists tightly while he had a livid expression on his face, and he seemed to be trying hard to control his emotions. Xianxia's appearance caused the spectators to feel even more self-satisfied. "Hey you Yang, right? Weren't you talking a lot just now? Come on and say something. Why have you suddenly become mute?" Chen Mei spoke abruptly. Xianxia took a deep breath, and then he glanced at them and said, all of you are going too far. So we are. What are you going to do about it? Bite us." Someone immediately used what Xianxia had said earlier. "What would all of you do if I win?" Xianxia spoke abruptly. All of them were stunned, and then they said, "Is it possible? Is it even possible?" "What if I do?" said Xianxia. At this moment, a man suddenly withdrew a few dozen fire crystals and said, "I'll give all of these fire crystals to you if you succeed. There are quite a few here that are over 100 years old, so it isn't a small amount. What do you think? I'll do the same if you succeed." "Me too." It wasn't long before practically 90% of the people here had withdrawn their fire crystals, and there were over 1,000 fire crystals at least. Most of them were only a few dozen years old, but there were a few that were over 100 years ago. Moreover, there was even one that was 400 years old, and it came from Chen Mei. Yang Yi nodded and said, "Xiaoman, take all of them and give them to the Grand Elder. Ask the Grand Elder to take custody of them for now." The Grand Elder glanced at Yang Yi and said, "There's no need for that. Just leave them there. No one will dare to go back on their word." Yang Yi nodded. He was just about to speak when Chen Mei spoke abruptly. "Yang, I'll fucking kneel down and lick you if you're able to resist by Chen's full strength." Yang Yi was slightly stunned, and then he gazed at the Grand Elder and Chen Yan. "Does it count?" Chen Yan's face twitched as he glared fiercely at Chen Mei. The latter refused to back down and glared back at him. Obviously, Yang Yi had truly infuriated her. "It does," replied the Grand Elder. Chen Yan pondered deeply for a short while and said, "Yang, if you lose, then you have to hand over all the 1,000-year-old fire crystals and kowtow 100 times to every single person here. If you agree, then everything that Chen Mei and everyone here said counts. All right?" Yang Yi didn't hesitate at all to agree. No one noticed that a slight grin of success had appeared on the corners of Yang Ye's mouth. Yang Yi and Bai Chun stood in confrontation at the center of the hall, and there was around 30 m between them. Someone seemed to have spread the news about the bet between Yang Yi and Bai Chun. So more and more members of the fire spirit race were surging into the hall. At this moment, the hall was filled by a crowd. "That's the Tigress man? He really is just at the Exalt realm, yet he actually dares to face a Monarch realm expert, and it's even a sword cultivator who has attained peak Earth rank sword intent. Does he want to die? Haha! Don't underestimate him. He was very arrogant just now. Perhaps he's capable of surmounting his realm of cultivation." Besides the geniuses on the hallowed rankings and the top-rate geniuses of the various races, ordinary Exalt realm experts are utterly incapable of surmounting their realms of cultivation to challenge Monarch realm experts. Moreover, this Exalt realm profounder is even injured while his opponent is a Monarch realm expert who has comprehended sword intent. That Tigress man will definitely die in this battle. That may not necessarily be the case. He seems to be calm and composed, and there's no fear in his eyes. I presume he definitely has some sort of trump card. He gave us a pleasant surprise earlier. Perhaps he'll be able to do it again. Right, I mean that I hope he won't die that quickly after he resists Bai Chen's attack. Otherwise, it would be too meaningless. What if he really turns the situation around? If he does, then I'll eat shit. Chen Yan, it's best if you think this through. Meanwhile, the fourth elder gazed at the fire crystals in his hand and said, "I presume these 5 1,000-year-old fire crystals are the last of all the fire crystals you've accumulated over the years. If you lose, then your strength wouldn't improve at all for the next few years. Moreover, if you lose them, then you'll be in trouble if you suffer any injuries. After all, the defiant profounders are about to escape the seal." Yang Yi didn't trust the second elder, so he'd suggested that the fourth elder took temporary custody over the fire crystals which they were betting with. Moreover, he'd even asked Xiaoman to restrain Chen Mei. Chen Yan agreed to all of Yang Ye's requests. However, he made a request of his own, and that was Yang Yi had to become Chen Mei's flameling if Yang Yi lost. The explanation Xiaoman provided him allowed Yang Yi to understand what a flameling was. It meant eunuch. Yang Yi naturally agreed immediately. He would definitely not act so rashly if Bai Chun wasn't a sword cultivator. Unfortunately, Bai Chun was one, unless a sword cultivator didn't utilize a sword or possess sword intent that surpassed his own, otherwise. Chen Yan grunted coldly and said, "But what if I win?" Just as the fourth elder said, all his accumulations of wealth over the years could be represented by those 10 1,000-year-old fire crystals. He'd lost 5 earlier, and even his heart felt like it was bleeding from the loss. So, he had no other choice but to make another bet in order to recuperate his losses. Of course, it was because he was confident in Bai Chen's ability. After all, Bai Chen was at the Monarch realm and possessed peak Earth rank sword intent. As far as he was concerned, the reason Bai Chen lost just now was because they'd underestimated their opponent. Moreover, he felt that Yang Yi would definitely not be a match for Bai Chen once Bai Chen took Yang Yi seriously. As for the reason why Yang Yi dared to agree to the bet, he hadn't given that any thought at all. I'll dismember you, piece by piece. Bai Chen gazed at Yang Yi while his face had recovered its calm. Yang Yi paid no attention to Bai Chen. He gazed at Qian Mei instead and said, "Woman, didn't you ask me to be arrogant and show off just now? All right, I'll do it right now. I really look forward to seeing you become my flameling." Qian Mei spoke coldly. "I really look forward to seeing you kneeling down and licking me as well. Ha ha ha." Yang Yi glanced at the others in the surroundings before his gaze descended onto Bai Chen, and he said, "You're a sword cultivator, and a strong one too. In other words, your sword techniques are very formidable, right?" Bai Chen replied, "It's just all right. But killing you is as easy as flipping my palm." Yang Yi nodded and said, "I'd intended to keep a low profile, but it can't be helped. I'm really unable to continue keeping a low profile when facing an idiot like you who likes to put on airs. Come, execute your strongest sword technique. I won't dodge or block it." Ha ha, what a joke. He wants Bai Chen to execute his strongest technique, and he won't dodge it? Who does he think he is? Even if Zhu Dengfeng rises up from the grave, he still wouldn't dare to do that, right? It seems obvious to me that he has gone mad. How laughable. We actually made a bet with such a madman. How truly laughable. Where did Xiaoman find such a weirdo? Where did he get the confidence to say that he'll resist Bai Chen's strongest sword technique without dodging? Where? I think he's delusional. The others in the surroundings who'd made bets with Yang Yi just now started to speak in succession. All of them didn't hold back at all and spoke loudly, as if they wanted Yang Yi to hear them. Yang Yi glanced at them and said, "What would all of you do if I succeed? If you do, then I won't just give all my fire crystals to you. I'll even kowtow 100 times to you and admit that I had eyes yet failed to see. Moreover, I'll stay far away from you in the future. All right?" One of the men stepped forward and spoke coldly. Yang Yi glanced at him, and then he glanced at the others and said, "What about all of you? We'll do the same." "Exactly." Yang Yi nodded and said, "Stand over to the right with him. If I lose and don't die, then I'll do the same and kowtow 100 times to each of you." In next to no time, 90% of the people here had walked over to the right, and it totaled to over 300 people. On the other hand, only 3 people remained on the left. Yang Yi was quite surprised that these 3 hadn't walked over. Moreover, he even knew one of them because it was Fu Jingxian. Besides Fu Jingxian, there was a black-robed man and a woman who stood by Fu Jingxian's side. The man wore a mask that fully concealed his appearance, but it was obvious from his outward appearance that he was a human. As for the woman who stood by his side, she was from the fire spirit race. At this moment, she seemed to be pulling the masked man to the right, but he remained adamant on staying on the left, and this made the woman stamp her feet with rage. "I've never seen someone who is so desperate to die." Meanwhile, Bai Chen spoke abruptly. "You intend to resist an attack of mine without dodge or blocking it? How laughable. Even the geniuses in the top 5 positions on the hallowed rankings wouldn't dare speak like that to me. I'm really very curious. Where exactly did you get the confidence to say that? Do you know Zhu Dengfeng?" Yang Yi spoke abruptly. Bai Chen was slightly stunned and said, "I cultivated painstakingly in the Sword Dao for over 10 years for the sake of fighting him. Unfortunately, he's dead. But I can tell you that I'm 70% confident in my ability to defeat him, even if he were alive now." Yang Yi said, "I met Zhu Dengfeng in the past, and the feeling he gave me was that he was full of confidence. He was extremely confident yet wasn't conceited because he refused to underestimate any opponent. However, while you are very confident as well, you're confident to the point that you feel you're matchless in the world. Besides that, do you know that you're so full of fucking nonsense? If their bet wasn't one where he could only defend himself and not attack, he would have attacked a long time ago and not waste his breath like this. Yang Yi really couldn't figure out why so many people like to waste their breaths before fighting. Especially some people who like to introduce themselves before a fight, and then speak about their pasts or constantly threaten their opponents by describing what would happen to their opponent if they did something. Since a battle couldn't be avoided, then it should begin immediately. Nonsense wasn't something that could improve the strength of anyone, and it was impossible for a bunch of nonsense to make the enemy yield. In his opinion, if something could be resolved with battle, then it was best to not waste his breath. I've never seen anyone who's so desperate to die. Bai Chun raised his sword slowly and pointed it at Yang Yi. He said, "You've succeeded at infuriating me. So, the consequence is death." As soon as he finished speaking, the profound energy within him suddenly surged before shooting into the sword he held. A strand of dazzling light erupted from the sword, and then a sword howl instantly shot into the sky. The swords throughout the entire hall started to tremble violently as if they'd been summoned. 10th level sword intent. At this moment, Bai Chun hadn't held back at all, and his 10th level sword intent surged madly out of him, and then some of the profounders in the surroundings started moving backward repeatedly, because they were too close to him, and his sword intent was like a mountain that pressed down upon them and made them feel extremely uncomfortable. Qian Yan finally revealed a slight smile when he saw the fierce and sharp sword intent that Bai Chun emanated. In his opinion, not to mention an Exalt Realm profounder like Yi Yang who was injured, even an expert who was similarly at the Monarch Realm like Bai Chun would definitely be unable to resist this attack that carried 10th level sword intent without dodging it. So, since Yi Yang would definitely die, his fire crystals would return to his possession, and he would even be able to gain more. The Grand Elder frowned slightly, and his gaze towards Yang Yi carried a trace of bewilderment. Xiaoman spoke abruptly. "Old man, save him if he's unable to resist it." "No. Didn't you hear how he talked to your grandfather just now?" replied Tong Fun. "If you don't, then I'll make you bury me instead. You damnable little girl." Bai Chun suddenly soared into the air before he suddenly shouted, "Yi Yang, killing you doesn't require my strongest sword technique. All I need is an ordinary attack like this." He waved his right hand as he spoke, and a snow-white strand of sword chi shot forward. It was extremely sharp and fierce when enhanced by 10th level sword intent, and the air throughout its path surged. It was a truly astonishing sight. However, Yang Yi didn't attempt to dodge at all. In next to no time, everyone watched as the sword chi struck Yang Ye's body, and then nothing happened. The sword chi vanished. The spectators were instantly flabbergasted, and so were the half-saints in the surroundings. A short while passed before Yang Yi greedily inhaled a deep breath, and then he gazed at Bai Chun who was completely dumbstruck. "You've lost." As he spoke, he suddenly turned to look at Qian Mei. "Come, kneel down and lick me." He stretched out his hand and started undoing his robe. The atmosphere was deathly silent as all of them gazed at Yang Yi. They didn't understand why that had happened. After all, it was the full strength of a Monarch Realm expert, but Yang Yi had actually resisted it without dodging and counterattacking. Moreover, he even revealed an expression of satisfaction. Is he a half-saint? Meanwhile, an absurd thought appeared in their minds. The 4 half-saints here stared fixedly at Yang Yi as if they wanted to see through him. "No, that's impossible. It's absolutely impossible." Meanwhile, Bai Chun suddenly started howling madly while he waved his sword once more, and a strand of sword chi that was even sharper, fiercer, and swifter than before instantly arrived in front of Yang Yi. Yang Yi didn't dodge it and just allowed it to strike him. Everyone watched as the sword chi instantly vanished upon coming into contact with Yang Ye's body. How could that be possible? All of them opened their eyes wide while disbelief filled them. Bai Chun, on the other hand, seemed as if he'd seen a ghost, and his entire body couldn't help but start trembling. The Grand Elder, 4th Elder, and Tong Fen exchanged glances, and then they nodded lightly. Meanwhile, a wisp of envy flashed through Tong Fen and the 4th Elder's eyes because the Grand Elder had gained 2 more 1,000-year-old fire crystals just like that. He'd gained for 1,000-year-old fire crystals with such ease. So it would be a lie if they said they weren't envious. On the other hand, Qian Yen had lost years of accumulation. He'd lost 10 1,000-year-old fire crystals from just 2 bets. Such losses were extraordinarily huge. As expected of the Grand Elder, Qian Yen took a deep breath and said, "Yi Yang. Good. Good. Very good indeed. I never expected that you even deceived me. 11th level sword intent. The 11th level. Good. Very good. I never expected that someone in the hallowed grounds was able to attain the 11th level of sword intent. Very good indeed. 11th level sword intent." The others were stunned. In next to no time, all of them came to an understanding. There were only 2 possibilities behind why Yang Yi could resist Bai Chen's sword chi without suffering any injuries. The first possibility was that Yang Ye's strength far surpassed Bai Chen. Obviously, that was impossible, because Yang Yi was clearly at the Exalt realm right now. The second possibility was that Yang Ye's sword intent surpassed Bai Chen. It was clearly the latter. Because one sword intent arrived at the 10th level, it was utterly impossible for those who possessed weaker sword intent than the person to cause any harm to that person. Heaven rank sword intent. All of them were extremely shocked. After all, that sickly and weak fellow who they'd ridiculed and looked down upon was actually a sword cultivator. And he was even a sword cultivator who'd comprehended heaven rank sword intent. All of them had very colorful expressions on their faces when they thought of the bet that they'd made with him. Qian Mei had even slumped weakly on the ground, and her face was covered in disbelief. After all, 11th level sword intent could be ranked in the top 10 even on the hallowed rankings. The laughable part was that she'd ridiculed him for being weak when she was the true weakling. There were numerous monarch realm experts in the world, but there were very few existences who'd comprehended heaven rank sword intent. Monarch realm experts didn't have the slightest advantage before such monstrous geniuses. The most composed person here was Xiaoman, because Yang Yi had revealed a little of his strength to her just now. However, her heart was surging with tempestuous waves of shock, just like everyone else. After all, Yang Yi had merely revealed to her that he possessed sword intent, and she hadn't imagined that it would be heaven rank sword intent. Yang Yi didn't fully undo his robes, and he merely just removed the outer layer of his clothing before he gazed at Qian Mei and said, "Woman, didn't you say that you would kneel down and lick me? I'm prepared, so let's begin. Of course, if a half-saint like your grandfather interferes and helps you, then I would naturally be helpless to do anything if you intend to go back on your word." Qian Mei's face turned pale. "Yi Yang, it's best to show mercy whenever it's possible." Meanwhile, one of the profounders from the fire spirit race stepped forward. However, he hadn't been able to continue because Yang Yi pointed at him and said, "I remember you. You said that you would kowtow 100 times to me if I was able to resist Bai Chen's attack. Come. I'm prepared for that as well." As he spoke, he glanced at the group on the right and said, "It's the same for all of you. It's time for you to fulfill your promises. So why don't all of you kneel right now?" All of their faces became unsightly, and one of them said, "Yi Yang, are you really going to leave no room for reconciliation? What's your name?" Yang Yi spoke abruptly. That fellow was stunned and said, "I'm Ao Sheun from the fire spirit race. I admit that we underestimated you just now, but—" "Cut the crap!" Yang Yi suddenly interrupted him and said, "You're right. I can't be that merciless. Since it's like that, I've changed my mind. I don't want them to kowtow to me, but I want you to do it for them. How many people are there? It's 100 per person. So count it on your own." "You!" Ao Sheun was furious and said, "Yi Yang, you're going too far." Yang Yi laughed with ridicule yet paid no attention to him. He gazed at the Grand Elder and said, "Grand Elder, what do you think?" The Grand Elder had gained great benefits because of him, so he refused to believe that the Grand Elder would refuse such a small matter. The Grand Elder glanced at Yang Yi and then he glanced at the group on the right. "If Ao Sheun is unwilling to kowtow on all of your behalf, then do it yourselves. If the members of my fire spirit race dare to make a bet, then they should be willing to face the consequences." Ao Sheun said, "Grand Elder, he's just a human. You. The Grand Elder just glanced indifferently at Ao Xieyun and said, he's Xiaoman's husband right now. In other words, he's a part of our fire spirit race. Understand? Right at this moment, Xiaoman suddenly walked over to Ao Xieyun with her red iron hammers in her hand, and she said, let's forget about them for now. You have to kowtow right now. I'll smash your head apart if you don't. You. Ao Xieyun was just about to speak when a hammer arrived above his head, and it was just a few centimeters away. Ao Xieyun's face turned pale. I'll count to 3. I'll smash your head apart if you don't do it, said Xiaoman. 3, 2, 1. Thump. Ao Xieyun knelt down hastily, but it was too late because Xiaoman's hammer had descended straight down towards him. Bang! Ao Xieyun's entire head exploded apart. Everyone here was stunned. Xiaoman was slightly stunned as well because she hadn't expected that he would kneel at the last moment. However, it seemed to still be a bit too late. She pulled her hammer back, walked over to Yang Yi, and then spoke softly. He was too slow. He was too soft. He was... In short, it isn't my fault at all. Yang Yi was at a loss for words. Meanwhile, Qianmei spoke abruptly. Yi Yang, do you really intend to offend the entire fire spirit race? Yang Yi glanced coldly at the group on the right and said, to be honest, I really look down on all of you. Truly. It's fine to be weak. Because if you're willing to work hard, then the day will come when you become strong. But as men, all of you don't even dare to keep your word. That's a true disgrace. As for kowtowing, there's no need for that now. I'm afraid that making trash like all of you kowtow to me would make my lifespan be halved. When he spoke up to this point, Yang Yi paused for a moment before he continued. I know that all of you definitely hate me to the bone, and you wish for nothing more than to swarm over and kill me. I'm even aware that so long as I stay within the fire spirit race, then all of you will definitely look for all sorts of opportunities to take revenge on me. When he spoke up to this point, he suddenly glanced at them again and said, but let me tell all of you that I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid at all. Because not to mention a few hundred pieces of trash like all of you, even a few hundred more wouldn't be enough to kill me. How arrogant. How fucking arrogant. Their expressions turned unsightly to the extreme, and many glared angrily at Yang Yi as if they wanted to fight him. However, they instantly abandoned their intentions to fight him when they saw Xiaoman who stood by his side. After all, that tiger's strength was in the top 3 within the fire spirit race. So, they could only glare angrily at him and allow him to continue acting arrogantly. Yang Yi wasn't interested in arguing with them. He turned around to gaze at Qianmei and said, I can't be bothered to make a fuss about it with them. However, you won't be that lucky. Come. I'm ready for you to kneel down and lick me. Qianmei didn't move, and she just gazed at him with resentment. Yi Yang, you're one. Is this even necessary? Meanwhile, Chen Yen spoke abruptly. It's always best to be lenient when possible. Otherwise... Humph. Ha ha ha. Yang Yi chuckled and said, Second Elder, I don't understand such principles. All I know is that I won the bet. Since your granddaughter has lost, then she should fulfill her promise. Of course, Second Elder is a half-saint, so I would be helpless if you intend to take her away by force. After all, you're a half-saint. He might not make a fuss about it if it was anyone else. However, he would be a fool if he didn't when it was Qianmei, because she would definitely act against him in the future. Since it was like that, why would he give up such an opportunity? He couldn't kill her, but just humiliating her wasn't too bad. Especially when the Grand Elder had his back right now. Arrogant young men don't live for long, said Chen Yen in a low voice. I kept a very low profile before this, but all of you still came looking for trouble with me. Yang Yi continued. Since it's like that, then why should I continue acting like a weakling? Second Elder and that woman over there. Just be direct. Are you going to kneel and lick me or not? Chen Yen intended to say something, but Qianmei suddenly said, I'll do it. As she spoke, she walked over towards Yang Yi while everyone watched, and then she stretched out her hand to undo Yang Ye's belt. Moreover, a strand of coldness had flashed through the depths of her eyes at the same instant that she lowered her head. Yang Yi suddenly took 2 steps back and spoke angrily. What are you doing? Licking you. Qian Mei glared angrily at him. Yang Yi said, just go ahead and lick. Why are you trying to remove my pants? How would I lick you without removing your pants? Qian Mei continued in an angry tone. Yang Yi glanced at his pants, and then he glanced at Qian Mei. Suddenly, he exploded with rage and pointed at her as he spoke angrily. You pervert! You shameless woman! I just wanted you to lick my shoes. Yet you actually wanted to lick me there. You! Are you even worthy of that? All the spectators in the surroundings were at a complete loss for words. It was an insult. When had Qian Mei even been insulted like that? Moreover, it was even in public. So, a savage expression instantly appeared on her face, and she said, Yi Yang, I'll kill you. She was about to attack while she shouted. However, Xiaoman, who stood by Yang Ye's side, suddenly acted, and a red hammer arrived above Qian Mei's head before she could even attack Yang Yi. Meanwhile, Qian Yan acted decisively when he saw Xiaoman move, but Tongfen obstructed him right away. The atmosphere here suddenly became tense. Yang Yi chuckled, restrained his smile, and spoke seriously. Actually, there isn't any great enmity between us. Unfortunately, you've acted against me time after time, and you even intended to kill me. I'm a man who doesn't offend unless offended. So since you've offended me, then I have no choice but to show no mercy. As he spoke, Yang Yi raised his hand and slapped Qian Mei on the right cheek. The spectators gasped. He actually dared to slap her. After all, Qian Mei's grandfather was an elder of the fire spirit race and a half-saint. Is he not afraid of death? Qian Mei seemed as if she'd been petrified. He actually dared to slap him? Slap me? Even grandfather has never laid a hand on me. Once she recovered from her shock, Qian Mei instantly seemed as if she'd gone mad, and she disregarded the hammer above her and intended to stop at nothing to tear Yang Yi into pieces. Meanwhile, Yang Yi suddenly said, just hitting the right isn't fair, and it doesn't look nice. As he spoke and while Qian Mei was just about to attack, Yang Yi swung his palm against Qian Mei's left cheek. This time, Yang Yi seemed to have used a huge amount of strength, and Qian Mei was blasted flying. You're courting death. Qian Yan roared furiously as he slapped his palm towards Yang Yi. Tongfen stood before Yang Yi and slapped his palm forward as well. An enormous explosion resounded from the collision while the space in that area instantly collapsed, and then a pitch-black spatial rift swiftly swept towards the surroundings. The others in the surroundings were horrified by the sight of it, and they hurriedly shot backwards. After all, they would definitely be unable to escape death if they were sucked into the spatial rift. Fortunately, the Grand Elder acted. He waved his right hand lightly, and then the spreading spatial rift was instantly frozen on the spot, and merely an instant passed before it was completely repaired by the energy of the laws. Yang Ye's eyes narrowed slightly while a wisp of solemnness flashed through his eyes. The Grand Elder is very formidable. At the very least, he's much stronger than Shen Ming. This ends right now. All right? The Grand Elder glanced at Chen Yen and Tong Fon before his gaze descended onto Yang Yi in the end. Of course. Yang Yi smiled. I'm a man. How could I possibly make a fuss about it with a woman? The mouths of the others twitched. You realize you're a man now? Why didn't you remember that when you hit her just now? Even though they thought like that, not a single one of them stepped forward to criticize him again. At this moment, they noticed that this fellow Yi Yang was a madman who didn't think things through at all. So, offending him would make them suffer a fate that was worse than Ao Sheun and Chen Mei. Of course, most importantly, they'd realized that the Grand Elder intended to protect him. The Grand Elder glanced at Yang Yi before he withdrew his gaze, and he said, Since it's like that, then let's just leave it at that. Those who intend to continue attending the marriage ceremony can stay behind, and the rest can leave. Grand Elder, could it be that my granddaughter was struck for nothing? Meanwhile, Chen Yen spoke in a low voice. The Grand Elder replied, Since you feel like that, then your granddaughter can slap Yi Yang twice as well. However, she must fulfill the conditions of the bet. All right? Looks like you intend to protect that human. said Qianyan. The Grand Elder said, Qianyan, there needs to be reason when doing anything within our race. You've lost, so you must pay a price. If Yi Yang lost, he would have to pay a price as well. Understand? Qianyan fell silent for a while before he smiled. Good. Very good. The world is always changing. I still have a very long time. As he spoke, he stretched out his hand and grabbed Qian Mei before both of them vanished on the spot. Yi Yang, I swear that I'll kill you. At the moment both of them vanished, Qian Mei's ferocious roar suddenly resounded. Yang Yi chuckled and didn't care at all. Because of the conflict they had with Yang Yi, most of the people here didn't stay behind. It wasn't long before only a few people remained, and it included that masked man and the woman who stood by his side. Yang Ye's gaze descended onto the masked man, and then his brows knit together slightly because the man made him feel quite uncomfortable. Let's go. The woman by his side suddenly pulled on his wrist. The masked man gazed at Yang Yi for a short while before he left with the woman. After the masked man left, Yang Yi withdrew his gaze and looked at Bai Chun. What? You intend to continue betting? Who exactly are you? Bai Chun gritted his teeth. He'd thought that his sword Dao was the strongest in the hallowed grounds besides Zhuo Dengfeng. No, it should be said that he felt he wasn't even inferior to Zhuo Dengfeng. But he hadn't expected that he would actually encounter someone with heaven-rank sword intent at the fire spirit race. No one could understand how he felt right now. Yang Yi said, I fought Zhuo Dengfeng before he left for profounder continent. You would definitely not be a match for him if he attained the monarch realm. Because his sword was much purer than yours, and his heart towards the sword Dao was stronger. The reason I'm wasting my breath on you is because you're a sword cultivator as well. So, I'm doing it out of consideration for the sword Dao and not you. Bai Chun fell silent for a short while before he suddenly gazed at Yang Yi and said, I'll defeat you. I definitely will. You're very welcome to do so if you do it in an open and upright manner. Yang Yi continued, however, if you try to play tricks like you had just now, then I guarantee that 100,000 beasts of desire will be waiting for you. Bai Chun took a deep glance at Yang Yi before he turned around and left. You possessed a natural treasure and comprehended heaven-rank sword intent. You're absolutely not an ordinary person. So who exactly are you? Meanwhile, the fourth elder spoke abruptly. I picked him up on the ground. Xiaoman spoke abruptly. In any case, he's absolutely not a spy. The corners of Yang Ye's mouth twitched. Does she think I'm an object? She picked me up? That sounds so terrible. Can't you just say that you rescued me? Yang Yi replied, if you think that I'm a spy, then I can leave the fire spirit race once I've recuperated. Or you can send me away from here right now. No! Xiaoman and the half-saints shouted at practically the exact same moment. Yang Yi was stunned. You're mine. Xiaoman looked Yang Yi in the eyes and spoke in an extremely serious tone. In our race, it's a huge humiliation for a woman to be abandoned. If you dare to abandon me, then I'll kill myself and kill you. Yang Yi was at a loss for words. Xiaoman seemed to have noticed that something was wrong with what she'd said, and she immediately corrected herself. I'll kill you, then take my own life. Right, that's it. Meanwhile, one of the elders said, Fourth elder didn't have any ill intent. He was just quite curious because of the treasure you possessed and the strength you revealed. After all, I presume that even if it's in the hallowed halls, there are very few who can give out a natural treasure as their dowry and possess heaven-rank sword intent. Moreover, we really don't have a good relationship with the hallowed halls. Of course, it doesn't matter even if you're from the hallowed halls, because the defiant profounders are about to emerge from the seal, so we'll still join forces with them regardless of how bad our relationship is. Yang Yi laughed bitterly. Looks like I won't be able to leave the fire spirit race for now. But it's fine because I haven't recovered completely. I would really be giving my life away if I left and encountered Shen Ming's group. Alright, so many things occurred tonight, and it has delayed your wedding night. We old men will stop disturbing the two of you. As he spoke, the Grand Elder and the Fourth Elder's figure shook slightly and vanished on the spot. Don't break Xiaoman's heart or I'll kill you no matter who you are. Tongfen spoke these words before vanishing on the spot. Xiaoman's room. Xiaoman gazed excitedly at the pile of fire crystals on the table, and she said, "This is 30 years old. This is 100 years old. Wow, this is 200 years old. Little Yang, we're rich. Little Yang." Yang Ye's face darkened. He'd seriously and solemnly refused such a nickname, but Xiaoman disregarded his protests. Yang Yi shook his head, withdrew a 1,000-year-old fire crystals, and passed it to her. He said, "This is for you, it should be helpful to you." Besides those fire crystals which he gave the Grand Elder, he'd won a total of 6 1,000-year-old fire crystals from Chen Yen. He'd given 2 to Xiaoman, so he had 4 more. After he found out how important the fire crystals were, he understood that they were very precious, because they could create monarch realm experts. However, he didn't feel any reluctance because a few fire crystals were nothing when compared to his life. Xiaoman fell silent as she gazed at the fire crystal. "What's wrong?" asked Yang Yi. Xiaoman suddenly said, "Why are you being so nice to me?" Yang Yi was slightly stunned, and he said, "You saved my life." She replied, "I was just using you." "Using me?" Yang Yi smiled. "How? By marrying me?" Xiaoman nodded. Yang Yi smiled and said, "If it's that, then I forgive you. But I'm quite curious. What exactly made you forcefully drag me here to marry you?" She replied, "A huge amount of fire poison appeared within my grandfather's body from a problem in his cultivation. So he wouldn't be able to live for long. He knew that I would definitely be bullied once he passed away, and I might even be killed. So he forced me to marry someone, because so long as a pregnant woman of the fire spirit race doesn't violate the rules of the race, then no one can harm that woman. I'd originally intended to find someone to put on a show and trick him, but I never expected that I would encounter you, and I never imagined that I would even obtain a type of fire element natural treasure. It's the first time I've taken the possessions of another, but I had no other choice because it could save my grandfather. I, Xiaoman, don't want to owe anyone anything in my lifetime, so you're prepared to give yourself to me, because you wouldn't owe me anything then, right?" said Yang Yi. She nodded in response. Yang Yi sighed softly. "Silly girl. Do you realize that you saved me? If you killed me at that time, the nether ghost flame would still be yours, and you wouldn't have to feel that you owed me anything. Understand?" Xiaoman blinked and said, "Why didn't you say so?" Yang Yi was at a loss for words. "Miss Xiaoman, since we've cleared the air between us, then I feel that it isn't necessary for us to be married. Regardless of whether it's the nether ghost flame or those 1,000-year-old fire crystals, they aren't as valuable as my life. So, in short, I still owe you and not the other way around. Thus, you don't have to wrong yourself and marry someone you don't like." Yang Yi knew that he wasn't someone who could give his undivided attention and affection to a single person, but he didn't want to be like a breeding horse. Because every single woman he accepted would cause Su Qingshi, Xiao Yushi, and the others to feel a little sadder. Moreover, while he had a good impression of Xiaoman because she'd saved his life, he was very clearly aware that it wasn't love. Besides that, Xiaoman merely had a slightly good impression and felt some guilt towards him. It was impossible for her to feel love for him as well. Both of them didn't love each other, so if they were to be united because of this, then it would definitely cause a tragedy for them in the future. Xiaoman fell silent for a short while upon hearing Yang Yi, and she said, "What you said makes sense, but everyone knows that we've been united in marriage. I would really lose face if we split up right now. Moreover, the old geezer will definitely think that you were just playing with me because humans frequently play with women. If that happens, then you'll definitely die." Yang Yi thought for a moment and felt that she made sense. After all, the reason he'd been able to gain a foothold in the fire spirit race was mainly because they felt he was Xiaoman's husband. The reason the Grand Elder and Tongfun had protected him were mainly because of that as well. Once he made their true relationship clear, then Chen Yen would definitely be the first to look for trouble with him. If he was at his prime, then he would naturally have no need to fear a half-saint. After all, he could run even if he wasn't a match for his opponent. But even 2 monarch realm experts could crush him in his current state. "Why don't we fake it for now?" Xiaoman spoke abruptly. "In that way, you can safely recuperate here, and I can feel at ease from helping you. What do you think? Xianxia thought for a moment and said, all right, but I would owe you another favor because of that. Xiaoman was quite displeased by his reaction. Why do you keep talking about favors? Your flame saved my grandfather, and that's equivalent to saving me. In short, I'll show you no mercy if you continue treating me like an outsider. Xianxia smiled and said, all right, at the very least we can be considered to be friends now. It really isn't good to act like that to a friend. Xiaoman nodded and said, that's how it should be. As she spoke, she passed the two 1,000-year-old fire crystals she had and the other fire crystals to Xianxia and said, they belong to you, so keep them, especially these 1,000-year-old fire crystals. They'll be extremely useful once you attain the monarch realm. In the future, don't be such a fool and give them away just like that. Understand? Xianxia shook his head and pushed them back to her. We agreed that we wouldn't treat each other as outsiders, but you're doing it right now. That isn't good. Xiaoman gazed at him for a short while, and she finally took them when she noticed the firm expression on his face. All right, then I'll be taking them. I'm going to sleep. Are you coming? Xianxia was speechless. They were still acting, so they were living in the same room. Of course, Xianxia didn't get on the bed and sleep with her. The important matter at hand for him was to recover. Besides recovering, he was prepared to utilize the fire crystals and water soul to charge into the monarch realm. Since he arrived at the hallowed grounds, Xianxia gained a clear understanding of how insufficient his cultivation at the exalt realm was. Only by attaining the monarch realm would he be able to resist half-saints and survive in the hallowed grounds. Of course, only by attaining the monarch realm would he have the chance to retrieve the sword precursor. Xianxia sat cross-legged on a chair as he withdrew a 1,000-year-old fire crystal and swallowed it. It had just entered his body when he felt like a piece of molten metal had been thrown into his body. Moreover, he seemed like a spirit vein that was filled with and covered by seemingly material energy. Xiaoman's eyes carried a trace of bewilderment as she gazed at Xianxia, who sat cross-legged on the chair. She was no fool. She was very clearly aware that the identity of this fellow who she dragged back here was definitely not ordinary. Regardless of whether it was the natural treasure or the heaven-rank sword intent, both of them revealed that he was definitely not ordinary. Of course, besides a mysterious identity, she felt that he was stupid. After all, only an idiot would just give away a natural treasure and 1,000-year-old fire crystals. But why does this idiot seem so pleasing to me? Xiaoman grinned as she held the fire crystals in her grasp, and then she fell asleep. Just like that, 3 days had passed, and Xianxia was still seated cross-legged on the spot while 10 extreme-grade energy stones remained on his lap. Xianxia had utterly underestimated the 1,000-year-old fire crystal, because he still hadn't fully absorbed the energy of the fire crystal after consuming almost 100 extreme-grade energy stones. This allowed him to understand why those half-saints attached such importance to the 1,000-year-old fire crystals. Because it really was a precious treasure. In these 3 days of time, the energy provided by both the extreme-grade energy stones and 1,000-year-old fire crystal had allowed him to recover from 90% of his injuries. However, he didn't stop because recovering was only the first step, and the most important step was to charge into the monarch realm. He didn't dare to charge into the monarch realm while residing above ground because he would die if Shenming and the others caught him. So, he had no choice but to attain the monarch realm within the territory of the fire spirit race. Because this was one of the only places that the hallowed halls wasn't able to interfere. Moreover, it was the only place that he could rest at ease while charging into the monarch realm and wouldn't have to worry about a half-saint suddenly attacking him. While Xianxia was recovering from his injuries, Xiaoman didn't stay idle as well, and she too consumed a 1,000-year-old fire crystal. At this moment, she was absorbing the energy within it. 1,000-year-old fire crystals were extremely beneficial even to half-saints. So Xianxia had clearly noticed that Xiaoman's aura was growing stronger throughout this period. Just like that, both of them started to madly absorb the energy of fire crystals in the room. 5 days later, Xianxia's injuries were completely healed. As he gazed at the 1,000-year-old fire crystals that laid before him, Yang Yi didn't hesitate to pick another up and swallow it. At the same time, he withdrew over 100 extreme-grade energy stones and placed them around himself. Just like that, Yang Yi seemed like a vortex of energy, while the energy that came from within the fire crystal and energy stones completely enveloped him. However, Yang Yi felt that it still wasn't sufficient, and he withdrew another 100 extreme-grade energy stones and placed them around himself. In an instant, the entire room was filled with dense energy. Qian Mei's room. At this moment, she was venting madly. There were two handsome men on her bed, and they were ceaselessly entangled with her while shaking incessantly like madmen. The entire bed was shaking and shaking violently as if it would collapse at any moment. Faster! 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 Suddenly, Qian Mei started howling hysterically. At the same time, one of the men who was on top of her started speeding up. Ah! Suddenly, Qian Mei screamed while she started trembling violently like a bolt of lightning had surged into her. Her figure trembled continuously for a short while before she finally calmed down. Suddenly, two rays of cold light flashed, and then both the men were completely lifeless. Who's there? Qian Mei sat up swiftly, and a masked man was suddenly standing before her bed. Who are you? Qian Mei stood on her bed with a vigilant expression on her face, and she didn't seem to feel any embarrassment from being completely naked. The masked man spoke abruptly. Do you want to kill Yi Yang? The profound energy within her surged in secret as she asked, What are you trying to say? He repeated his question. Do you want to kill him or not? Qian Mei took a deep and long glance at him before she spoke with a ferocious expression covering her face. Of course I do. I've never been so humiliated throughout my lifetime. I wish for nothing more than to skin him alive and drink his blood. But he has the Grand Elder and Tong Fan's protection. So what can we do? Even my grandfather is helpless against him right now. The masked man replied. The hallowed halls sent news that the seal on the defiant profounders has suddenly loosened, and it requested the assistance of the fire spirit race. So, the Grand Elder, Tong Feng, your grandfather, and the others have left for now while the remaining half-saints of the fire spirit race are in closed-door cultivation. In other words, he doesn't have any backing right now. Moreover, based on my observation, he'll definitely be trying to break through into the monarch realm soon. That's our best opportunity and final opportunity. I can tell you for a fact that even your grandfather wouldn't be able to kill him once he attains the monarch realm. Qian Mei grunted coldly and said, Monarch realm experts are like ants before my grandfather. The masked man didn't refute her and just said, It's our best opportunity to kill him. So are you up for it or not? Are you sure that the Grand Elder and the others have left? Asked Qian Mei. The masked man replied, Of course. Qian Mei revealed a savage smile. Even the heavens are helping me. I'll go kill him right now. She was about to head over while she spoke. The masked man suddenly said, You'll be giving your life away if you head over right now. Her face turned cold. What? He replied. According to my speculation, he has probably recovered from his injuries now. So you'll only be giving your life away if you head over right now. Don't doubt my words. He's 10 times or even a few dozen times stronger than you ever imagined. Are you trying to scare me? Qian Mei naturally didn't believe him. The masked man said, Not to mention anything else, you can't even deal with his heaven-rank sword intent. What would you do if you alarm him? Qian Mei thought for a moment and felt that it made sense. So she said, Then what do you plan to do? Wait until the critical moment when he's charging into the monarch realm, and then we'll launch a surprise attack, replied the masked man. Why do you want to kill him? Who are you? Qian Mei suddenly spoke with a vigilant tone. The masked man said, You'll understand in the future. You just have to understand that we both want to kill the same person. I only have a single request. I want one of his possessions and you can have all the rest, including the fire crystals he possesses. Right at this moment, Qian Mei suddenly attacked. She instantly arrived before the masked man, and then slapped her palm towards him. However, she'd merely just swung her palm forward when he'd vanished on the spot, and he was already behind her. Qian Mei's expression changed violently, and then she turned around and gazed at him with a serious expression. "Who exactly are you?" "I'm not your enemy," the masked man continued. "If I'm not wrong, then he'll be charging into the monarch realm by tomorrow. That would be our opportunity to act. Right, if it's possible, then get more people to join us. You should have friends in the fire spirit race after all. Let me give you one final warning, don't act arbitrarily. Because he's much, much stronger than you imagined. I'll explain it like this. If I were to fight him in a one-on-one battle, then it would mostly end with my death." When he spoke up to this point, the masked man's figure shook slightly and vanished on the spot. Qian Mei's entire body felt cold. A day later, phenomenon of the heavens and the earth suddenly appeared in the sky above Xianxia's room. All the members of the fire spirit race were shocked because it represented that someone was charging into the monarch realm. With Xiangyi at the center, the spirit energy in an area of a few hundred kilometers started surging madly towards Xiangyi. Everyone in the surroundings was astounded by this scene, and all of them rushed over to Yang Ye's room. Is Yi Yang advancing into the monarch realm? Or is that tigress about to break through? It should be Yi Yang. Such movement would only arise from an advancement into the monarch realm. Isn't it a little too grand? Who knows? Let's just watch. This wasn't the end of it at all. The room Yang Yi resided in was like a black hole, and the energy in the surroundings were being ceaselessly sucked into the room. Less than 15 minutes had passed before the energy within an area of 50 kilometers had been completely sucked away. All of it had converged around Yang Ye's room, and then surged like torrents into the room. Yang Yi was absorbing the energy like a madman. The energy was converted by the primordial pagoda upon entering his body, and it was transformed into threads of violet profound energy which flowed throughout his body. Meanwhile, his body was like a black hole that madly absorbed the violet profound energy. At this moment, the energy from within the extreme-grade energy stones, the energy from within the 1,000-year-old fire crystals, and the profound energy which Yang Yi had absorbed was sufficient for two people to attain the monarch realm. However, it was far from sufficient for Yang Yi, because all the energy was filtered upon entering his body, so only an extremely small amount of violet profound energy was formed in the end. Yang Yi had no choice but to swallow another 1,000-year-old fire crystal, and he withdrew 500 more extreme-grade energy stones. Moreover, the primordial pagoda within him had started to get to work. The primordial pagoda made the energy within an area of 500 kilometers start to surge towards Yang Ye's room, and then transform into pure energy that entered into him. After that, they were converted into violet profound energy by the primordial pagoda before finally flowing through Yang Ye's body. Xiaoman had stopped cultivating right now, and her eyes were fixed on Yang Yi. What's going on with that fellow? He has absorbed that much energy, yet it's actually still not enough? Xiaoman was extremely puzzled because she hadn't absorbed so much energy when breaking through into the monarch realm. Yet now, this fellow who sat before her had almost absorbed 2 times the energy she absorbed that day. Moreover, it seemed like it was still far from sufficient. Are you attaining the monarch realm or the half-saint realm? She spoke softly. It wasn't just Xiaoman who was surprised. All the other profounders from the human race and fire spirit race in the surroundings were of the same mind. The energy in an area of 500 kilometers had surged into Yang Ye's room, and such a scene would only occur when a 9th-rank monarch realm expert was charging into the half-saint realm. Yet now, this fellow Yi Yang was just a 9th-rank exalt realm profounder. Who exactly is he? Qian Mei's asked in a low voice. The masked man was standing by her side, and there were over 100 profounders of the fire spirit race standing behind them. Moreover, over 50 of them were at the monarch realm. They were the help that Qian Mei had gathered, and most of them were those who'd lost the bet to Yang Yi and intended to take revenge for the humiliation they suffered. Qian Mei had a solemn expression on her face while she gazed at the energy that surrounded Yang Ye's room. It wasn't just her. The others who stood behind her were the same. They were very clearly aware that the stronger one was and the greater one's natural talent was, the more energy would be required to charge into the monarch realm. This scene before their eyes told them that the strength and natural talent of the person within the room had far surpassed their own. You still intend to kill him regardless of who he is, right? Said the masked man. Even though I want to kill him, it doesn't mean that I want to be used. Qian Mei spoke coldly. I've investigated you. Shui Ling brought you here as her partner, but she knows nothing about you. It's even to the extent that both of you still haven't shared the same room until now. So, you've definitely come to the fire spirit race's territory with some other objective. Is that important? The masked man replied. Is my identity really that important? Of course it is. Qian Mei spoke coldly. Even though I want to kill Yi Yang and that bitch Xiaoman, it doesn't represent that I'll join forces with an outsider to deal with members of my own race. The masked man fell silent for a short while and then he said, I underestimated you a little. I can tell you that I didn't come here in order to act against the fire spirit race. Moreover, would you even believe me if I said that I'd come here with such intentions? Then what are you doing here? She pursued an answer. The masked man gazed at Yang Ye's room and said, I came for him. She repeated her question. Then who is he? The masked man replied, You'll naturally find out once he's dead. I only have a single objective here, and it's to kill him and obtain something from him. I'll leave immediately once I'm done. At that time, you can feel free to notify the half-saints of your race if I still refuse to leave. As for now, we should join forces and not doubt each other. Otherwise, we won't just be unable to kill him, he might kill us instead. Qian Mei took a deep and long glance at the masked man before she moved her gaze towards Yang Ye's room. She said, I'm growing more and more curious about his identity. But it's fine. He'll definitely die today even if he's a genius ranked on the hallowed rankings of your hallowed halls. In the room, Yang Ye's entire body was undergoing a transformation. The advancement into the monarch realm stressed upon a complete qualitative transformation of the body. Actually, any other ordinary person would have broken through a long time ago, but Yang Yi was different, because his body had been cleansed by the primordial violet energy. So ordinary energy was utterly useless towards his body. Only purified energy, the violet profound energy, was capable of affecting his body. But in that way, he needed an extremely terrifying amount of profound energy to complete the transformation. If profound energy was compared to water droplets, then 100 water droplets were needed to form a droplet of violet profound energy. So, he had no choice but to consume another 1,000-year-old fire crystal. More and more people were gathering outside Yang Ye's room. I scanned the surroundings just now. The energy within an area of 500 kilometers have been completely absorbed by Yi Yang. Is he really breaking through into the monarch realm and not the half-saint realm? Even though it's quite a shocking scene, it's still a little inferior when compared to an advancement into the half-saint realm. Half-saints are equivalent to peak experts of this world, and they are capable of seizing the fortune of the heavens. The energy required to attain such a realm isn't something that just this little bit of spirit energy can fulfill. Even double the current amount wouldn't be sufficient. But it doesn't seem like an advancement into the monarch realm. The greater a genius' natural talent is, the more difficult it is to advance into the monarch realm, and the heavenly tribulation they faced would grow stronger as well. It seems to me like he'll definitely lose his life beneath the heavenly tribulation. Even if he can escape death from his heavenly tribulation, he can't escape his mortal tribulation. Qian Mei will definitely not let this opportunity slip by. If it's needed, I wouldn't mind giving him an extra blow, so that he understands that the arrogant don't live long. But what if he succeeds? So what if he does? There are countless people here who want to see him dead. Can he fight so many on his own? All of us just have to spit once and we can drown him to death. Don't you think so too? That does make sense. Then it's decided. We'll attack at the critical moment, so even if we can't kill him, we'll still make him fail. All right? A cold smile arose on the corners of Qian Mei's mouth as she gazed at them. As they say, the wages of sin is death. He's dead even if he has 100 lives. The masked man spoke abruptly. If he doesn't, then all of us will die. Why do you keep talking him up yet talking us down? Qian Mei was displeased. So what if he has comprehended heaven-rank sword intent? Could it be that he can fight so many of us by himself? Perhaps. The masked man spoke softly while a cold glow flashed on the center of his palm. Bang! Right at this moment, Xianxia's room exploded apart, and an extremely formidable aura swept like a storm towards the surroundings. However, it wasn't long before this imposing aura shrunk back. The monarch realm. I've succeeded? Xianxia's eyes were still slightly closed while the remaining energy in the surroundings was still surging into him. Let's attack. Qian Mei spoke ferociously. The masked man shook his head and said, he still has to face his heavenly tribulation. We'll act while he's resisting it. Bang! Another loud explosion resounded, and then a bolt of black-colored divine lightning that was over 300 m long and 30 m wide had suddenly appeared in the air above Yang Yi. The divine lightning didn't descend straight towards Yang Yi but circled the sky above him. At the same time, more and more black-colored divine lightning appeared incessantly. It wasn't long before the entire sky was covered in huge bolts of black divine lightning. It was like the end of the world had arrived. The expressions of everyone here changed when they saw the divine lightning, and then they took numerous steps back. After that, all of them withdrew their weapons. Black divine lightning. He's a defiant profounder. He's actually a defiant profounder. How could this be possible? One of the profounders from the fire spirit race cried out involuntarily with shock. At this moment, Qian Mei was stunned as well. She hadn't imagined that Yi Yang would actually be a defiant profounder. He's actually a defiant profounder. Suddenly, she swiftly turned her head towards the masked man and said, no wonder you were so afraid of him. So he was a defiant profounder. He's actually a defiant profounder. Ha ha ha. He'll definitely die even if he's breaking through into the half-saint realm now. The masked man didn't speak, but a trace of bewilderment flashed through his eyes. At this moment, Xiaoman was dumbstruck as well. She gazed at Yang Yi with disbelief and said, a defiant profounder? You're actually a defiant profounder. Kill him! Kill him! Meanwhile, someone shouted, and then over a dozen people charged at Yang Yi. At the same time, Yang Yi suddenly opened his eyes. A ray of cold light flashed. Hiss! The heads of 3 people at the front of the group instantly flew into the air while their bodies were still charging forward, and they charged forward for another 3 meters before the 3 headless corpses finally stopped moving and crashed to the ground. All the others stopped on the spot and gazed at Yang Yi with astonishment. All those 3 corpses belonged to Monarch Realm experts. However, 3 Monarch Realm experts had died just like that right before them, and they hadn't even been able to discern how he did it. It was instant annihilation. He'd instantly annihilated 3 Monarch Realm experts. All of them were dazed. At this moment, Qian Mei and the others were shocked. 3 Monarch Realm experts. He instantly annihilated 3 Monarch Realm experts. Is he a half-saint? Rumble. Meanwhile, more and more black divine lightning converged in the sky, and the rumbling they emanated resounded incessantly by the ears of everyone. Some profounders who were beneath the monarch realm were even instantly shaken to the point they bled from all 7 apertures. Rumble. Another wave of loud rumbling resounded before a black pillar of lightning suddenly descended from the sky, and it descended straight down towards Yang Yi. Moreover, as soon as it descended, the lightning in the sky instantly started descending as well. Almost 1,000 pillars of lightning descended in succession towards Yang Yi. Everyone, attack! This is our best opportunity to kill him. Right at this moment, a voice resounded, and then countless rays of silver light covered the heavens and the earth as they shot towards Yang Yi. Qian Mei glanced at the masked man because he was the one who spoke those words. She pondered deeply for a moment before a savage expression appeared on her face as she said, he's a defiant profounder. He can't be allowed to overcome his heavenly tribulation. Attack! This is our best opportunity. Attack! With Qian Mei and the masked man in the lead, all those profounders who'd been terrified by Yang Yi instantly felt confident once more. They hesitated briefly before practically 90% of the people here charged once more towards Yang Yi. A ferocious expression flashed through Yang Ye's eyes when he saw them charging towards him. As the wise men of the past said, even if one avoided trouble, trouble might come on its own. Yang Yi flicked his finger, and then a strand of sword chi formed an arc that swept forward. The silver light that just arrived before him was instantly blasted into dispersion, and then some of the figures at the front of the group were instantly slashed apart at the waist. Shatter! Right at this moment, the masked man shouted furiously, and then a ray of cold light suddenly smashed against Yang Ye's sword energy. An explosion resounded, and then the sword chi was blasted apart. Yang Yi glanced at the masked man, and then he casually waved his hand upward. A ray of light flashed and collided with the black divine lightning that led the group. Bang! That pillar of black divine light was blasted apart and transformed into arcs of electricity that dispersed towards the surroundings. Meanwhile, numerous Monarch Realm experts had arrived in front of Yang Yi. They were just about to attack when a ray of light flashed once more, and then their heads instantly flew into the air. Die! The masked man suddenly shouted furiously once more. As soon as his voice resounded, a silver needle that was as long as a finger transformed into a ray of silver light that appeared before the center of Yang Ye's forehead. However, 2 fingers clamped down upon it at the instant it was about to pierce through Yang Ye's skin. After that, the silver needle shot backward at extremely swift speed and instantly arrived before the masked man. The masked man's pupils constricted as his hands moved swiftly, and an expanse of silver light flashed forward. Clinking sounds resounded as almost 100 silver needles transformed into pieces that scattered to the ground. Yang Yi paid no further attention to the masked man. He flicked his finger upward, and a strand of sword chi shot up to strike against a pillar of lightning that had arrived above his head. Bang! An enormous explosion resounded, and then the pillar of lightning was blasted apart. Meanwhile, the attacks of a few dozen Monarch Realm experts smashed against him. Bang! Yang Yi took 5 steps back. At this moment, one of the pillars of lightning struck down upon him, and he was drowned beneath its brilliance. The others were stunned, and then they were overjoyed. He's dead? In an instant, a strand of sword energy shot up from within the lightning's brilliance, and then over a dozen pillars of lightning were blasted apart. Yang Yi appeared before them once more. At this moment, besides a few spots of clothes that had been blasted apart, there wasn't a single injury on his body. All of them were astounded, and their eyes were filled with terror, especially Qian Mei. Her mind was completely blank as she gazed at him with astonishment. The masked man's warning had caused her to raise her expectations of Yang Ye's strength, but she noticed to her horror that it was just as the masked man had said. Yang Ye's strength was many times, or even more than 10 times stronger than she'd imagined. Since all of you are so desperate to die, then I'll fulfill your wish. Yang Yi issued a command in his heart, and then 100 swords suddenly flashed out. He controlled them with his will, and they transformed into rays of light that charged into the crowd. In an instant, shrill cries resounded incessantly. The Monarch Realm experts amongst them were in comparatively favorable situations, but the profounders below the Monarch Realm weren't able to resist a single attack from Yang Yi, and they were instantly annihilated. Moreover, while they weren't killed in an instant, some Monarch Realm experts were heavily injured. Yang Yi paid no attention to them. He raised his head and gazed at the pillars of lightning instead, while a trace of a heavy gaze appeared in his eyes. While he'd destroyed many of those pillars of lightning, there were many more left. Moreover, they were growing progressively stronger. At this moment, the energy contained within every single pillar of lightning could instantly annihilate a first-rank Monarch Realm expert with ease. Most importantly, he felt that these pillars of black divine lightning weren't the final wave of his heavenly tribulation. Suddenly, a ray of violet light and a bolt of lightning flashed, and then the violet mink and Lei Lin appeared by Yang Ye's side. What are the two of you doing here? Yang Yi frowned a little. He hadn't allowed them to come out here because they would be in danger if a half-saint suddenly attacked them. The violet mink revealed an innocent expression and pointed at Lei Lin. On the other hand, Lei Lin was looking at the divine lightning in the sky, and she was blinking incessantly while drool flowed incessantly down her mouth. Yang Yi was slightly stunned when he saw her like that, and then he said, "You want to eat that?" Lei Lin nodded forcefully. Yang Yi said, "Are you sure that you can?" She nodded forcefully again. Yang Yi hesitated for a moment before he said, "Then go ahead. I'll protect you." Lei Lin grinned, and then she flashed to the sky above Yang Yi and opened her mouth. The others watched with horror and astonishment as the black pillar of lightning suddenly shrunk progressively before finally becoming the size of a finger. In the end, it was sucked into her mouth. Lei Lin patted her stomach with a greedy expression, and then she opened her mouth again. The others in the surroundings were petrified. That little girl is actually eating black divine lightning? That's divine lightning. Even defiant profounders fear it. But she ate it just like that? You're dead. Right at this moment, a furious howl suddenly resounded. The others looked over towards the source of the voice, and they saw the masked man suddenly toss a black jade tube towards Yang Yi. The jade tube flashed through the sky and trembled slightly. It was just about to release something when a ray of violet light suddenly appeared on it, and then it was gone. The masked man was stunned. Suddenly, he looked towards the violet mink who was by Yang Ye's side. At this moment, the violet mink was sizing up the jade tube with a curious expression. "Give my space tube back to me." The masked man's eyes almost split open from rage. The violet mink blinked, and then she tossed it lightly towards the masked man. Not only was he not delighted by this, the masked man's expression even changed drastically, and then countless barriers of profound energy swiftly appeared on him. When Qianmei, who stood by his side, witnessed this scene, she hurriedly covered herself in layers of profound energy shields. However, some of the fire spirit race's profounders by her side were still dazed. Finally, when it was about to descend from the air, the black jade tube suddenly became 100 times larger than it was. After that, countless rays of silver light rained down from it like a storm of silver rain, and it was even extremely swiftly. Everyone here was astounded. It was already too late when some of them wanted to dodge it. Their bodies were instantly pierced by countless silver needles, and they were densely covered in needle holes. On the other hand, some comparatively stronger Monarch Realm experts reacted in time, and they formed profound energy barriers around themselves. However, the profound energy barriers merely lasted for less than 2 breaths of time before they were penetrated. Howls of pain resounded incessantly as countless people crashed to the ground. Less than 2 breaths of time passed before blood had formed a river on the ground. Moreover, the group of a few hundred here only had less than 10 still standing. Yang Yi was shocked as well because he hadn't expected that the jade tube would actually be that terrifying. After all, most of the corpses on the ground belonged to Monarch Realm experts. Even the attacks he launched with 100 swords weren't able to create such an effect. What exactly was that black jade tube? At the same time, he felt fortunate in his heart. Because if it wasn't for the little fellow, then those silver needles would have descended onto him. Even though he was confident that his body could resist them, injuries would be unavoidable. However, he couldn't allow himself to be injured at all right now because he had an even stronger enemy. The Heaven Dao. Even though he was at the Monarch Realm right now, it was far from over, and all his previous hard work would be wasted if he couldn't resist the heavenly tribulation. The violet mink blinked. She hadn't imagined that something she casually tossed at them would actually be so formidable and killed a huge amount of people just like that. She was very afraid that Yang Yi would scold her for causing trouble. So she immediately flashed over to Yang Ye's shoulder and started to ceaselessly rub her head against his cheek. Yang Yi smiled and consoled her before he gestured with his right hand, and then the black jade tube fell into his grasp. After that, he gazed at the masked man, Qianmei, and the others. Even though they'd been able to resist it, they were clearly injured, and there were no less than 100 needle holes on each of them. The masked man gazed at Yang Yi and said, "I never expected that you cut the crap and die." Yang Yi flicked his finger repeatedly, and then over a dozen strands of sword chi shot forward. However, a woman suddenly appeared here. She held a sword in her left hand while a saber resided in her right grasp. She swiftly waved both her hands, and then a strand of sword chi and saber chi formed a cross that surged forward. Hiss! Yang Ye's sword chi was instantly blasted apart, and the sword and saber chi didn't slow down in the slightest as they arrived before Yang Yi. Yang Yi smashed his fist forward, and they were immediately blasted into pieces. The woman glanced at the corpses on the ground and said, "You killed all of them. You cut the crap and die as well." Yang Yi took a step forward and made a grasping motion with his hand. A sword appeared in his grasp before it shot forward like a bolt of lightning. The sword emanated a long ray of light that shot towards the woman. Everywhere it passed, a huge spatial rift was created. Moreover, the space around the sword itself was actually trembling violently, as if it was suffering the impact of a terrifying force. 11th level sword intent. It ripped through space. Qian Mei's pupils constricted into the size of needles when she witnessed this scene, and it was like she'd lost her soul, because her senses told her that she would be utterly incapable resisting that attack if it was aimed at her. At this moment, she finally understood what the masked man said, and she understood why the masked man was so afraid of that fellow who was called Yang. Because he was too terrifying. The expression of that woman who appeared in front of Yang Yi had changed as well. She hadn't expected that a casual swing of his sword would actually be so terrifying. She possessed first-level heaven rank sword intent as well, but the sword intent contained within that attack actually felt extremely dangerous to her. She didn't dare act carelessly in the slightest. She held tightly onto her sword and saber as she crossed them together and slashed forward. Helix blade. As soon as she spoke, a strand of saber chi and sword chi flashed forward. They actually started to twist around swiftly once they shot forward, and they formed a helix. Most importantly, they were actually both at the 11th level of sword intent and saber intent. Qian Mei and the others watched as the helix of saber and sword chi smashed against Yang Ye's attack. A moment of silence ensued, and then the helix exploded into pieces while Yang Ye's attack didn't slow down at all. It instantly arrived before the woman. The woman's pupils constricted violently while horror appeared in her eyes for the very first time. She knew that she'd completely underestimated the strength of this man who stood before her. His sword had arrived before her, so it was impossible to dodge. She had no choice but to raise both her sword and saber to block it. Bang! Her figure was blasted over 100 m away before she smashed against a wall, and the wall shook violently before it crumbled down. But it wasn't long before the woman stood up once more. She just stood up and was about to attack when she noticed to her astonishment that both her saber and sword were actually gone. At this moment, she finally recalled that they'd been instantly blasted apart just now. They were both Dao artifacts. She suppressed the astonishment in her heart and gazed at Yang Yi. "Who exactly are you?" Yang Yi didn't answer her, and he just looked up instead. At this moment, Lei Lin was still absorbing the lightning, and changes had started to occur to her as she absorbed countless pillars of black divine lightning. Her body had grown slightly larger while her aura was much stronger than before. Even though the black divine lightning was no threat to her at all until now, Yang Yi still didn't feel comfortable in his heart. He's a defiant profounder. Meanwhile, Qian Mei shouted abruptly, "Su Jiqing, kill him quickly." She was truly terrified of that man called Yang. Not only was she terrified by his strength, she was terrified by his bloody methods. A defiant profounder. Su Jiqing's expression changed drastically. She flipped her palms, and a flaming blade and icy sword appeared in her grasp. She said, "Defiant profounder, you actually dared to trespass into my fire spirit race's territory and even started a slaughter here? How audacious!" As she spoke, a strand of flames shot out from within her, and then it flew up into the sky and exploded apart before it vanished completely. "Right, kill him. Kill him." Qian Mei's entire face had warped. She knew that if he didn't die, then she would be the one to die. However, Su Jiqing didn't attack immediately because she wasn't the slightest bit confident in her ability to fight him. Her main objective right now was to delay this defiant profounder, because she'd called for backup. Yang Yi withdrew his gaze and shot it towards Qian Mei. Qian Mei's expression changed violently, and instinctively took a few steps back while speaking fiercely, Yang, if you dare to kill me, then my grandfather will definitely chase you to the ends of the world to kill you. My grandfather is a half-saint. No matter how strong you are, you can't be stronger than a half-saint." Kneel down and beg for mercy right now. Then maybe my grandfather might let you live. Fool! Yang Yi flicked his fingers repeatedly, and then 4 strands of sword qi shot forward. Qian Mei was horrified. But Su Jiqing suddenly shouted fiercely, and a strand of sword qi and saber qi flashed towards Yang Ye's sword qi. However, they were just about to smash against Yang Ye's sword qi when a ray of violet light collided against them. The violet light exploded apart with the sword qi and saber qi, and they dispersed in midair. Su Jiqing gazed at the violet mink who sat on Yang Ye's shoulder, and the violet mink blinked in response before waving her little claw as if she were showing off. Ah! Meanwhile, a shrill cry resounded from Qian Mei. Su Jiqing looked over and saw Qian Mei's limbs had actually been pierced by the sword qi, causing blood to flow incessantly from them. Meanwhile, a ray of violet light enveloped Qian Mei, and then she vanished on the spot before appearing right before Yang Ye's feet. What are you going to do to her? Su Jiqing shouted furiously. Yang Yi laughed coldly and said, My intuition tells me that your status in the fire spirit race is definitely not low. Since that's the case, then I'll spare you for now. As he spoke, he stretched out his hand, and a Dao rank sword appeared in his grasp before he swung it. Su Jiqing was horrified. She was just about to counterattack, but it was too late, and 4 strands of sword qi had pierced through her arms and legs. How swift! As soon as she finished speaking these words, her figure vanished on the spot and appeared before Yang Ye's feet. Su Jiqing's eyes were filled with a dazed expression because she'd actually been unable to even resist a single attack from a profounder in the same realm of cultivation. Yang Yi gazed at the masked man and didn't waste his breath at all. He was just about to attack when Xiaoman appeared in front of him, and she stared him in the eyes as she said, Are you a defiant profounder? Yang Yi replied, I won't harm you regardless of who I am. Xiaoman glanced at the surroundings. The surroundings were covered in corpses. Some were still alive and they were groaning in pain. When she saw all of this, Xiaoman laughed miserably and said, Besides the top 3 geniuses on the hallowed rankings, there are no other existences in the monarch realm within the hallowed grounds who are capable of instantly and easily annihilating profounders in the same realm of cultivation. If there was such an existence, then it might only exist amongst the defiant profounders. I actually brought a defiant profounder back, and I even treated your injuries. I'll kill you. As she spoke, one of her hammers flew out from her grasp and instantly arrived in front of Yang Yi. Yang Yi stretched his hand forward and grabbed it. Meanwhile, Xiaoman suddenly flew over to him, and then she smashed her other hammer towards him. Yang Yi frowned slightly as he smashed his fist against her hammer. Bang! A huge explosion resounded, and the formidable force of the impact blasted Xiaoman flying. Meanwhile, the violet mink waved her little claw once more. A ray of violet light enveloped Xiaoman, and then she appeared by Yang Ye's side. Yang Yi waved his right hand, and then countless intent swords that were condensed from sword intent enveloped Xiaoman, causing her to be unable to move. I'll definitely kill you. Xiaoman glared angrily at him while killing intent surged in her eyes. Yang Yi said, But you're not a match for me right now. You! She was furious. Yang Yi waved his hand and said, You'll understand everything in the future. At that time, you can decide if you want to become enemies with me or be friends with me. Now, be obedient because I can smash you to the ground with just one punch. It wasn't that he didn't want to explain, but he felt that it was pointless to explain right now. After all, it was impossible for him to explain while black divine lightning had appeared in the sky. How did you get into our territory? Su Jiqing spoke in a low voice. The world of lava was protected by half-saints. So, logically speaking, even the half-saints of the outside world would be unable to enter their territory. However, this fellow had just entered without causing even the slightest commotion, and he was even overcoming his heavenly tribulation here. It was that bitch Xiaoman who brought him here. Qian Mei suddenly roared furiously and said, It was her. It was that bitch. She colluded with the defiant profounders. She's dead. Her grandfather is dead as well. Haha. All of you are dead. Slap. A sword suddenly slapped against her face, and her cheek instantly swelled up. You! She glared angrily at Yang Yi. She was just about to speak. However, slap. A clear and resounding slap arose, and then the swelling of her face worsened. Yi Yang, you're definitely… Slap. Ah! Qian Mei howled like a boar that was being slaughtered. Slap. 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 Yang Yi would slap her every single time she tried to speak, and it wasn't long before her entire face had warped completely. Even her grandfather would probably be unable to recognize her now. She still wanted to say something, but she couldn't speak any longer. All she could do was glare resentfully at Yang Yi. You won't be able to escape, Su Jiqing spoke abruptly. Yang Yi glanced indifferently at her and said, I never thought about fleeing. How audacious! Right at this moment, a resounding howl suddenly appeared from the horizon, and then a huge palm flashed over through the sky. The palm tore through space as it clawed forcefully at Yang Yi. Yang, you're dead. You're dead. Meanwhile, Qian Mei opened her mouth and stuttered. Fuck off. His voice reverberated like a thunderclap as a ray of light shot into the sky. The sword chi tore through the sky as it smashed against the enormous palm. Bang! A huge explosion resounded as the sky shook violently, and then the sword chi dispersed into the surroundings while the huge palm instantly shrunk back. After that, an old man appeared before Yang Yi. The old man had a solemn expression on his face as he gazed at the mark that was left on his palm, and then he glanced at the black divine lightning which resided in the sky above Yang Yi. Heaven rank sword intent and the critical strike technique. How do you know the divine techniques of the hallowed hall's sword cultivators? Wait, black divine lightning? You're a defiant profounder. Right at this moment, rays of fiery light surged over from all directions, and then countless experts of the fire spirit race appeared here. How audacious! You actually dared to slaughter the profounders of my fire spirit race? A monarch realm expert of the fire spirit race glanced at the corpses in the surroundings. He was instantly infuriated, and he shot explosively towards Yang Yi. Swish! A ray of light flashed, and then he stopped on the spot. You! He hadn't even been able to finish speaking when a fountain of blood surged from his neck. The expressions of everyone in the surroundings changed drastically. Yang Yi waved his sword, and then a 300 long line appeared on the ground 30 in front of him. He said, If you're not a half-saint, then cross this line and die.